Welcome back to the program. I am joined now for some political analysis by Dr. J. Barth of Hendrix College and Mr. Robert Coon with Impact Management Group. Thanks to both of y'all for being here. Fun stuff to crawl through. We got a week's worth of it and then more after that. So let's begin. First of all, before we drill into the numbers that we just revealed, let's talk about issue one. There was a lawsuit ruling this week that will get kicked up to the Supreme Court. That basically has kicked the thing off the ballot, says it's unconstitutional. I guess my question to you is, and I'll come to Robert first on this, politically, do the for and against folks for issue one, do they continue advertising their message while this thing goes through the appeals process because of the window of time that is left to define this issue?
Absolutely, you have to. You have to pretend like it's going to happen and that people are going to vote on November the 6th. You have to expect that you're going to prevail on the lawsuit and be ready, because if you're not messaging and communicating your message, you can't wait around to see what the Supreme Court does.
Yeah. Jay, what do you see in the crosstabs on this issue that shows why only 25% are for this and 47% are against it, and still a pretty big undecided in there, 28.
Yeah. And there is a really big undecided, and I think the complexity of the issue, because it does have these different facets to it, which is of course the basis of the critique in the litigation, is leading to a lot of confusion, which means that it can be defined one way or the other, and whoever gets who does the advertising better can still win this thing. That said, there does seem to be some opposition that has really kind of locked in the second district. That's the part of the state where the negatives are the highest, and I think that's where some of the issues around separation of powers, corruption, some of those issues are probably most strong. And then with the Democratic base, the negativity is soaked in. And it's not getting the kind of lift from more conservative groups that you might anticipate.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is, you would expect Democrats to be largely against that issue one, but, they're not getting a boost from Republicans. They're about evenly split in this survey. Independents are upside down in this survey, so that's problematic. A lot of times these days you see independents siding more with Republicans. Here you have them more with Democrats. And then I think women are even about 10 points lower than men, which tells me that some of the emotional arguments that the anti-campaign are running about families and kids and older folks are kind of taking hold.
Yeah, and I do think that the corruption issue, the fact that the legislature would get more control over judicial rules, works really well with independents who really are pretty cynical about both parties, and corruption really resonates with independents.
Cynical about both parties. Jay, what are you talking about here? I do want to point out to folks tuning in too, just on party ID in our poll, we never wait on party ID. We always let the chips fall where they may, because somebody can change their mind about what their political affiliation is. 26.5% identified as Democrats in this poll, 38.5% Republican, 26% independent, 9% other. That's a big Republican number, but it would seem like Arkansans are making their bed with Republicans in terms of their party ID here. In a pretty strong way, in an environment where we're seeing nationally some of that is eroding.
Yeah, it is a Republican skew, a little more Republican skew than we've had in the last year or so. A few years back, it got that high. But I do feel a little better about the skew just because of how big the sample is. I mean, this is a 1,700 statewide sample. I think we'll have to watch down at the congressional district level, be more conscious of how party skews play there. Yeah. But I think at the statewide level,
surprised
I feel
you
okay
to see so many
this.
people affiliating Republican?
Not really. I mean, I think it could be a little high. I mean, it's all based on what the environment is. I think you could probably see a little bit higher Democratic turnout around the edges. But, Arkansas obviously has been changing from a more Democratic state to a Republican state. You kind of had a period of time where a lot of people kind of took that intermediate step and said they were independent. You're starting to see people settle in a little bit more after some time and saying outright that they're Republican. So it's kind of a natural progression.
Also, we'll see too, just based on turnout, will there be some first-time voters that come out that we maybe didn't capture in this poll? That could also change these numbers. And we're not done with this polling. We will do some more polling on some of these issues. Issue 2 is the voter ID measure that was referred by the legislature to voters here. Basically requires identification to go to the polls and vote. Overwhelming support on that, 71% for, 21% against. There is no litigation to knock this off the ballot at this point in time. I think there's something on the law, but not on the amendment proposal this one looks like a slam dunk, wouldn't you say, Robert?
I would. I thought the most interesting piece of this was it had support above 50% among African American voters and above 50% with Latino voters. I kind of was a little puzzled by that. I think the only really place where you start to see a little bit of attrition is the older the voter gets, they kind of start to say no. It's still above 60, but it starts to fall with age. For me, I read that as this. A lot of the electorate's looking at it from a practical standpoint and saying, I've got one in my pocket, it's not a big deal, I can pull it out. I think a lot of the opposition to this issue is on principle, on maybe some of the things that are rooted in the past, Jim Crow laws and impediments to voting and things like that. But I think the majority of the electorate looks at it from a practical standpoint rather than a principled standpoint, and they say it's not a big deal.
Yeah, Jay?
Yeah, and there's no litigation, as you know. There's also not much organized opposition, if any. So I think this one, unless something truly bizarre happens in the coming months, I think we can probably say that Arkansas is about to put this in the Constitution and therefore give the legislature more room to maneuver related to voter ID. This issue probably isn't going away. I mean, there'll probably be some litigation down the line if more stringent voter ID comes online.
Lastly, issue 3, this is the term limits proposal. It does have litigation pending against it as well, so there is a chance it gets thrown off the ballot. But today, if it stays on, it passed with 2/3 vote. I don't think any of the three of us are surprised by that. In the culture of what we were seeing at the state capitol with the negative headlines coming out of elected officials being convicted and stepping down, this is a tough message for those that are opposed to term limits to fight. The legal challenge may be the only way to get this thing kicked off the ballot.
And interestingly, much like the last issue, I mean, the folks who are opposed to this, it seems more principled. And it does do worse with Democrats than with Republicans. Democrats who have historically been opposed to term limits. And so I think some people somewhat cynically thought, well, they were opposed because they had the power. Well, they're still more dubious, even though they don't have the power.
It may still benefit them, though, eventually.
It probably will benefit Democrats. And I think there is probably, I don't know of a better environment to run a term limits amendment in than the one we're in right now with the daily headlines.
Last word to you, Robert.
The campaign kind of runs itself based on what you read in the news, and the fact that Democrats are the lowest, supporting group, even though they're above 50, is significant, I think. And a lot of people probably would think that it's about holding on to what we have and keeping control. But clearly, the Republicans and Independents are fine, having term limits, even if it's the folks that they have in control, making some changes on who those people are. So that was interesting.
Yeah, we still have 2 more proposals that we will roll out results on. That's the casino issue and the minimum wage issue. Those will be coming out later on. We also have the governor's race, President Trump's job approval rating, and all 4 congressional districts. We surveyed all of those. So you guys, your work's not done yet. So we got a lot of analysis to come for everybody that is tuning in. We will be rolling that out Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe even Thursday, who knows. So stay tuned to talkbusiness.net for more on that. Robert, Jay, thank you both very much. Appreciate it.
Roby.
I'll have you back in next week.
Okay.
All
Sounds
right.
great.
And that is all for today's Talk Business and Politics. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Roby Brock. We'll see you next time.